Hello, everybody. Good morning. Um, Welcome to our ALMA Buzz. My name is Emily Day. I am the co-chair of the Adult Library Marketing Association, or ALMA, along with my wonderful co-chair, Lainey Mays. And we are just so happy to have you here today. We have a really, really fantastic lineup of publishers who are all very excited to tell you about some of their upcoming books. And we are just excited to get into it. So before we begin, I do want to mention that there's a link to an Edelweiss catalog. Lainey just put that in the chat, and we will kind of put it in the chat intermittently throughout the morning. So feel free to follow along. And then after the buzz is over, we will send out an email with the slides and the link again and everything you could ever need. So the chat is open. Feel free to put any questions in there, or you can always reach out after we're done. All right, we are going to get started. And first up is Erica Loberg.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. As she said, my name is Erica Loberg from Soho Press, and I'm excited to share some upcoming horror and literary fiction titles from our spring list today. All these titles are available for request on NetGalley and Edelweiss, so please feel free to check them out after this presentation. And with that, I will get started on the next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. Starting with a new book from Hell's 100, which is Soho Press's new horror fiction imprint. I'm excited to introduce Our Winter Monster by horror aficionado Dennis Mahoney, who lives in upstate-ish New York, just north of the city. Publishing at the end of January. This is the perfect for fans of Paul Tremblay, fast-paced monster stories, holiday horror, and viciously frigid winter settings. Clay McLeod Chaplin calls this, quote, a slab of profoundly unsettling relationship terror, end quote, as it follows an unhappy couple running away from their problems and a horrible beast. The novel begins with the couple arguing in the car on their way to a ski village getaway they hope will save their damaged relationship. They're trying to outrun a blizzard, but as the tension in the car escalates with their bickering, so too does the storm, and they soon lose control of the car. Shortly after, the local sheriff receives a call about a couple in trouble and a mysterious creature wreaking havoc through the town and leaving mangled bodies in the snow. With this bone-chilling setup, the tension builds as we witness the main couple's relationship unravel across the pages, while the increasingly dangerous monster serves up shocking displays of gore. Between the monster and the couple, the read balances truly horrifying elements with a gossipy intrigue, making it super immersive and compulsively readable and very chilly. Now, if you look at the bottom of the screen there too, you'll see in red a URL that says hells100books.com. That's a website full of information on all our new and upcoming releases from Hell's 100. I'd encourage you to visit that for more info on Our Winter Monster, as well as another upcoming spring horror book we have coming that fans of Sweeney Todd and Mrs. Lovett won't want to miss. Next, please. Switching gears to our literary fiction imprint, at the start of January, we have Dark Motherland by Samra Upadhyay. This is a big book in every sense of the word. It's about this thick at 768 pages, and it's the magnum opus of an author who has won the Whiting Award, been shortlisted for the PEN Open Book Award, and was the first Nepali writer to be published in the West. Set in an earthquake-ravaged place called Dark Motherland, this is an epic dystopian reimagining of Nepal on the level of a Salman Rushdie or Don DeLillo novel. Combining love and political violence, Dark Motherland contains multitudes in two intertwining narratives. On one hand, we follow a revolutionary's daughter who marries into a plutocratic dynasty and gets swept into the family's politics. Then on a larger scale, we follow the politics of Dark Motherland itself through the story of its new dictator and his mysteriously powerful mistress. This is a transportive novel about politics, ambition, and social relationships, where the East connects to and collides with the West in brilliant and unsettling ways. To sum things up, I'll leave you with this great quote from author Dan Shawn. Quote, Dark Motherland is a stunning, utterly original achievement that lies somewhere in an uncharted realm between Rushdie, Dr. Zhivago, and Game of Thrones. End quote. And the next slide, please. In February, we have a novel called Oromai by Balu Girma. This is a momentous translation of Ethiopia's most famous novel, which was an instant sensation when it first published in 1983, but was then quickly banned for its frank, unflattering depiction of the government's Red Star campaign, which aimed at crushing the Eritrean rebellion in Ethiopia. The following year, the author vanished, and it's long been believed that he was murdered in retaliation for writing this novel. At once an engrossing political thriller and a sweeping tale of love, Oromai offers a sharp political satire that depicts life under the Derg, Ethiopia's military dictatorship in the 1980s. The story follows a journalist named Segai working as the head of propaganda for the Red Star campaign. On assignment in Asmara, Segai navigates the demands of his superiors while trying to reassure his fiancée back home that his faithfulness will not be misled on this trip. Of course, nothing goes as expected, and we follow Segai as he begins to fall in love with an enigmatic local woman, and he becomes disillusioned by the regime he serves when he's confronted with the horrors of war and betrayals that shake his faith in human nature. Oromai is a compelling historical artifact and a timeless story about power and betrayal in love and war, and this to fans of Gina Apostle, Viet Thanh Nguyen, and African politics. Next slide, please. Finally, in March, we have Counting Backwards by Binny Kirschenbaum, the acclaimed author of Rabbits for Food and several other novels that have been named best books by NPR, Time, and the Washington Post, among many others. Like her previous novel, Counting Backwards is an acerbic, darkly humorous second-person narrative that draws inspiration from the author's personal life, in this case, her experience of losing her husband to Lewy body dementia. The novel follows a loving married couple, Leo, a 53-year-old scientist researching autoimmune diseases, and Addie, a collage artist. Leo's illness begins with peculiar hallucinations, which the pair treat as a joke until things get progressively weirder as Leo finds himself hearing things that aren't real or unable to perform simple tasks. As things get worse, the jokes fade away, and Leo is eventually diagnosed with Lewy body disease, which has a life expectancy ranging from 3 to 20 years. As Leo moves from home to an assisted living facility and finally to a small apartment with a caretaker, we witness his cognitive decline over time and Addie's growing despair, anger, and guilt as she navigates losing her husband to dementia. As only she could, Kirschenbaum captures the humor, rage, love, and beauty of an impossible, painful experience, depicting a brutal disease with heartrending honesty and lacerating humor through her irreverent and unsympathetic narrator. Handless to fans of Rachel Kushner, Rachel Kong, and darkly humorous literary fiction. And the next slide, please. There's my email on the screen, eloberg@sohopress.com. If you have any questions, feel free to write me. And if not, thank you so much for joining us. And with that, I'll hand things off to Maddie.
Hi everyone, I'm Maddie Hughes, School and Library Marketing Manager for Disney Publishing, and I'm so excited to be here today and share some upcoming titles from across our imprints. Next slide. First up, we have a few special Disney edition titles that have recently published. Directing at Disney by Pete Docter chronicles the progression of the animation director role during the 1920s through the 1970s. These personal portraits of Walt's closest creative leaders offer a fuller picture behind the stories, characters, and magical realms in Disney's beloved and respected animated films. Dream Chasing is a recounting by former Imagineering president Bob Weiss of 4 decades of creating and seeing to completion challenging projects at the Disney parks, leading teams from the top secret high-tech corridors of Walt Disney Imagineering to the highest levels of the Walt Disney Company. And then third, we have Groundbreaking Magic. Martha Blanding began her extraordinary run with Disney in May 1971 as Disneyland's first ever Black tour guide, launching an impressive 5-decade-long career at the happiest place on earth in Anaheim, California. Groundbreaking Magic is a personal journey through 50 years of Disneyland as told like never before, through the eyes and perspectives of the first ever Black American to achieve a half-century-long career with the Walt Disney Company. Next slide. In March 2022, an international polar expedition team made an astonishing find, the wreck of Ernest Shackleton's legendary Endurance, lost in Antarctica in 1915 after being crushed by ice and then swallowed by the Weddell Sea. The harrowing story of Shackleton's survival and rescue of all 27 men aboard is well known, but the ship itself has lain unseen for a century, 10,000 feet underwater, until now. The vessel remains incredibly intact, as crystal clear photography and digital scans from the expedition reveal. This book is a thrilling firsthand account of the expedition, co-authored by its leader and deputy leader, John Shears and Nico Vincent, and it's the first and only book to fully document the discovery, produced as a companion to the National Geographic film Endurance. And this book has all the sort of high quality photography that you would expect from a Nat Geo title. Next slide. The Inherited Mind. ABC News correspondent James Longman was a preteen in boarding school when his dad, who was diagnosed with depression and schizophrenia, died by suicide. As he got older, James's own bouts of depression spurred him to examine how his father's mental health might have affected his own. He engaged with experts to uncover the science behind what is inherited, how much environmental factors can impact genetic traits, and how one can overcome a familial history of mental illness and trauma. In this memoir, he shares what he has learned on his quest to better understand himself and his family, what current genetic science is telling us about inheritance of mental illness, and how he has been able to persevere through his family trauma. Next slide. Switching gears a tiny bit, here beside the rising tide is the second novel by Emily Jane, following On Earth as It Is on Television. This is another genre-bending, really just fun ride of a novel. When 40-year-old Jen Lenaro, best-selling author of the Philippia Bay action romance series, decides to take her kids on vacation to Pearl Island, a place where she spent happy times in her own childhood, she hopes it will be an escape from burnout and her soon-to-be ex-husband. What she finds is 10-year-old Timmy Caruso, her summer friend from years ago, who disappeared one summer and never returned. Now he's emerging from the nighttime sea. He's still a kid and on a mission to save the world, and he says he needs her help. In the days that follow, as Jen grapples with work deadlines, spirited children, and her burgeoning interest in a very sexy contractor, alarming and mysterious events unfold along the coast. And when a terror appears in the deeper waters, Jen begins to wonder if, just maybe, Timmy is onto something. Next slide. Written in the Waters is a searing memoir by National Geographic explorer Tara Roberts that recounts her epic journey to trace the global slave trade across the Atlantic Ocean and find her place in the world. When Tara Roberts first caught sight of a photograph at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History depicting the underwater archaeology group diving with a purpose, it called out to her. Here were Black women and men strapping on masks, fins, and tanks to explore Atlantic Ocean waters along the coastlines of Africa, North America, and Central America, seeking the wrecks of slave ships long lost in time. Inspired, Roberts joined them and started on a path of discovery more challenging and personal than she could ever have imagined. Complex and unflinchingly authentic, this deeply moving narrative heralds an important new voice in literature that will open minds and hearts everywhere. Next slide. Tree Notes. From an esteemed National Geographic explorer and forest ecologist, Nalini Nadkarni, this collection of poignant essays, organized by season, explores the nature, value, and meaning of trees in our lives with charm and thoughtfulness. Inspired by Nadkarni's popular podcast broadcast by Utah's public radio station, KUER, Tree Notes comprises more than 45 brief essays organized by season. Chapters run from big questions. How many kinds of trees are there? Trees and lightning, and tree pollen, to the particular, the baobab tree, mistletoe, and conductor's batons. Lovely illustrations make every turn of the page a happy moment in this arboreal adventure. Next slide. Field Guide to the Birds of the United States and Canada, East and West. These entirely updated editions of National Geographic's top-selling regional bird field guides, which were originally published in 2008, provide ID information, maps, and illustrations for identifying more than 800 bird species of the eastern United States and Canada, and 1,000 bird species of the western United States and Canada. And for the first time, the Western edition includes the birds of Hawaii. So this is a really exciting update for anyone who has been a fan of these National Geographic birding guides. Next slide. That's all for me. If you need to get in touch, please feel free to reach out via email. We also have a number of the titles I mentioned and some additional ones available for requests on NetGalley and Edelweiss. So feel free to put in requests there. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sharon Shell from Independent Publishers Group, and I've got some great titles to share with you from some of our publishers. So next slide, please. Our first title is called River of Lies by James Latoile. It's by Ocean View Publishing, and it comes out in January. This is the second novel in the Detective Emily Hunter mystery series. The homeless camps spread throughout the city of Sacramento are a topic of heated debate among the residents. But when the camps fall victim to a string of devastating arson attacks, Detective Emily Hunter and her partner, Javier Medina, dive into the investigation and become acquainted with the real people whose lives have been destroyed. The attacks only begin to draw attention when two of the victims are identified as the city's former anti-homeless mayor and a camp social worker. But rather than strengthening the push for justice, the movement to completely abolish the camps intensifies. The investigation becomes politically charged when Emily discovers who stands to gain from burning the homeless out of their shelters. The investigation uncovers an unlikely suspect and a reluctant witness standing between Emily and the shocking truth. Next slide. Our next title is called The Betrayal of Thomas True by A.J. West. It's by Orenda Books and comes out in mid-January. It is the year 1715, and Thomas True has arrived on Old London Bridge with a dangerous secret. One night, lost amongst the squalor of London's hidden back streets, he finds himself drawn into the outrageous underworld of the Molly houses. Meanwhile, carpenter Gabriel Griffin struggles to hide his double life as Lottie, the Molly's stoic guard. When a young man is found murdered, he realizes there is a rat amongst them betraying their secrets to a murderous pair of justices. Can Gabriel unmask the traitor before they hang? Can he save hapless Thomas from peril and their own forbidden love? Set amongst the buried streets of Georgian London, The Betrayal of Thomas True is a brutal and devastating thriller where love must overcome evil, and the only true sin is betrayal. Next slide. Total switching gears here to the new fit, How to Own Your Fitness Journey in Your 40s, 50s, and Beyond. It's by Aaron Leventhal, and it's published by Triumph Books, coming out in January. So break through the plateau and create a meaningful, impactful fitness experience with this science-based approach to exercise and wellness over the age of 40. No matter how much you love your movement practice, whether it's running, Pilates, or spin classes, your body isn't responding like it used to in your 20s and 30s. Well, the truth is that as we age, we have different needs from our fitness practice, and fitness after 40 is anything but a one-size-fits-all proposition. It's about learning to curate the right plan for you based on individual factors and normative data. So while other books may focus on a particular type of exercise or a specific audience, the New Fit empowers readers with the knowledge to curate their own results-driven wellness plans based on data and individual factors. So author Aaron Leventhal, he is a certified personal trainer and a precision nutrition certified fitness expert, as well as a former professional soccer player for the Minnesota Thunder, where he also served as a conditioning coach for the Thunder and the Major League Soccer team, Minnesota United, for 15 years. Next slide. Our next title is called How We Heal: A Journey Toward Truth, Racial Healing, and Community Transformation from the Inside Out. It's by LaJune Montgomery Tabron. It's published by Disruption Books, coming out in mid-January. And in this book, How We Heal, LaJune Montgomery Tabron, who is president and CEO of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, makes a powerful case for hope through racial healing. From a vivid portrait of her childhood in 1960s Detroit to her leadership of one of the world's largest philanthropic institutions, LaJune shares her full circle American story, a coming-of-age journey where she gains a firsthand understanding of how systemic racism prevents our children and communities from thriving, and learns how the transformative role healing can play in helping all of us transcend the legacy of racial inequality. This book serves as a testament to the power of transformation and a blueprint for how each of us, no matter who we are or how we lead, can use racial healing to bridge the empathy deficits in our community. Next slide. This next title is called Protecting Whitney. It's the memoir of her bodyguard by David Roberts. It's by Chicago Review Press, coming out in late January. And David Roberts was Whitney Houston's bodyguard, the actual real one, not the movie one. So Roberts was hired in 1988 for Whitney Houston's UK portion of the Moment of Truth World Tour. And he was accustomed to working for diplomats and Fortune 500 companies and clients, but Roberts had reservations about working with a pop star. But Houston's heart of gold won him over from the moment they met at Heathrow Airport. There's a high bar for those who work in this business. You have to be willing to die for your boss. Houston made that easy. Roberts got to travel the globe with one of the most fun-loving and generous souls he'd ever met. His memoir reveals heartwarming anecdotes of life with one of the world's most recognizable stars. But there's also shocking and heartbreaking revelations. Roberts was present for some of Houston's most challenging ordeals, and he was helpless as he watched those who claimed to love and support her look the other way because they saw her voice as a cash machine. His heart was ultimately shattered as he witnessed her succumb to the one threat he could not protect her from, and that was herself. Next slide. And our last title is called Sports Illustrated True Crime. It's great writing from the pages of Sports Illustrated. Sports Illustrated, the most respected voice in sports journalism, presents a wide-ranging collection of true crime storytelling. The award-winning writers dive on stories on crime and punishment through expansive investigations and in-depth storytelling, featuring all sorts of stories in this anthology that probe past and present. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that. And if you have any questions at all, you can check out our website or email me directly. Thanks so much for listening. Up to Lainey.
Hi, everyone. Good to have everybody here. I'm excited to talk about some books very quickly. So let's get started. The next slide is just where you can find us. You know us, librarylovefest.com. And next is the first book. So Zeal by Morgan Jerkins. This is the author of Call Baby and Wandering in Strange Lands and the New York Times bestseller, This Will Be My Undoing. She's back with a really ambitious novel. It incorporates little-known historical details with a sweeping look at the lives of Black Americans from 1865 to the present day. Morgan was inspired to write this multi-generational love story, starting with emancipation and taking us through present day. And it gives us a panoramic look at Black American history from Natchez to Kansas to Chicago and beyond. So it starts in Harlem in 2019. A couple is gifted a love letter on a yellowing, crumbling piece of paper. And then it goes back to Natchez, 1865. So discharged from the Union Army as a free man after the war's end, Harrison returns to Mississippi to reunite with the woman he loves, Tirza. And meanwhile, in Louisiana, the newly freed Tirza is teaching at a freedmen's school and discovers an advertisement in the local paper looking for her. Are the risk of fleeing too great? Will she choose this life that seems like security? And it spans over 150 years, intertwining these stories of these star-crossed lovers and their descendants. And if you love a multi-generational novel like Homegoing or The Vanishing Half, this is perfect for you. Next slide is Eddie Winston is Looking for Love by Marion Cronin. I am obsessed with Marion's debut, The 100 Years of Lenny and Margot. I would hand that book to anyone in 2021, and I was so excited about this one, and I thought, she can't do it again, and she did it again, and I love this one just as much. It has the same themes of like an unlikely duo and a balance of lighthearted and sadness and that the first one had, and it's great for book clubs. It revolves around a man, Eddie Winston. He's 90 years old, and for some circumstances have happened, and he's never been kissed. He has fallen in love, but it wasn't able to happen. So he's an incurable romantic, and he spends his days volunteering at this charity shop in the UK. He reunites people with things they've lost because he's kind of looking for something too. And he meets Bella, a troubled young woman who's 24. She just lost the love of her life. And they kind of strike up an unlikely friendship and decide, Eddie's going to get out there and find love. And there's a lot of fun scenes with dating apps as a 90-year-old. It's super fun. So if you like Remarkably Bright Creatures or, those funny sad, sweet combos that lift our hearts, this is perfect. And the next title is The Capital of Dreams by Heather O'Neill. It's coming in January. Heather is an award-winning author, and I know her U.S. debut, Lullabies for Little Criminals, is a favorite here at Harper. This is her latest, The Capital of Dreams, her latest dystopian fiction novel. And we're also going to have a simultaneous hardcover as well as the one before. Both of these will have hardcovers as well. This is about 14-year-old Sophia Bottom, who lives in a small country forgotten by Europe. Inside its borders, the old myths of trees that come alive and fairies who live among their roots have given way to an explosion of the arts and philosophy. And so she's this daughter of a revered artist, this writer named Clara Bottom. And her mother is really ego-driven and puts her art first. And so she feels a distance between them, like she'll never be clever enough for her mother. But then the country's greatest enemies invade, and the capital is under threat. And so Clara turns to her daughter to smuggle a new manuscript to safety on the last train evacuating children from the city. But when the train draws to a suspicious halt in the middle of the night, she has to flee for her life, and she loses the prized possession of the manuscript. So she's really frightened and alone, and she has to reclaim what she's lost. It's an epic journey. She meets other children and, like a lovely spin of magic, a talking goose. And the meditations on art and resilience in home are really beautiful, and it's captured my attention on all of my commutes. I'm very excited to get back to it. It's fun, and she has a lot of literary greats as fans. So like Emily St. John Mandel and Helen Oyemi, like they're big fans of Heather O'Neill. So don't listen to me, listen to them. Next is Care and Feeding by Lori Wolever. This is a candid memoir from Lori, who's a writer and editor. She spent over a decade assisting Anthony Bourdain, who she co-authored several cookbooks with, and has written about food for many other publications. She has had a really fascinating life in the food world and is a really great writer. And so this memoir traces her life from her small town childhood to working high-end restaurants with Bourdain and Mario Batali, who were incredibly helpful to her career, but kind of overshadowing often. This is really acerbic and wryly self-deprecating, and she attempts to carve out her own space as a woman in this world that is by turns toxic and intoxicating. And it goes into her life and her relationship with marriage and motherhood. It's honest and thought-provoking, and just a really, really great memoir, a great read. Next is How to Sleep at Night by Elizabeth Harris. She is an award-winning reporter at the New York Times, and she has this really humorous and smart debut that we're very excited to have on our list. I think it will feel a little timely. It's a sharp comedy about marriage and family stretched thin by politics. Who else knows about that? Gabe and Ethan have been together since they were in their 20s, and they have kind of this perfect life in the New Jersey suburbs, but their politics aren't always aligned, but the marriage is good. And Ethan decides to run for Congress as a Republican, but he has to have his liberal husband's blessing before he'll do it. And you can see the conflict happening. Then we have Nicole, a suburban mom who's lost her New York City fun life, and she's kind of wanting to something different, and her old flame comes into her life, and that's Ethan's sister, Kate. Kate is a political reporter. That'll be interesting with her brother's run for Congress. And her career life is not really fulfilled. So they kind of another spark continues. And it's all interconnected beautifully and just witty and fun. It's got a starred Kirkus review. This will be great for book clubs too. And then last, quickly, is The Cat Who Saved the Library by Sasuke Natsukawa. So this is a long-awaited sequel to the #1 international bestseller, The Cat Who Saved Books. It was a #1 bestseller in Japan. It's a book about books, and it's a girl who has asthma and isn't able to play sports and see her friends, and so she holes up in the library at school, and that's where she is her happy place. And she sees books she loves disappearing from the shelves one day, and this kind of strange man leaves a suspicious mysterious light is filtering through the library and the passageways, and then Tiger, the talking tabby cat who saves books, comes to the rescue. And so as in the increase of book bannings, this book urges us not to underestimate the power of great literature and be prepared to defend our freedom to choose. It's a really gentle read, but really whimsical. And that's it for me.
All right. Hello, hello. I am so excited to chat with you about some of the adult titles coming soon to you from Sourcebooks. Next, please. My name is Emily Ludloff, and I'm Library Marketing Specialist at Sourcebooks. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram for updated information, galleys, and free resources. And please feel free to email me with any questions you may have. Now on to the books. So Keep Me is a brand new scorching enemies to lovers romance from USA Today bestselling author Sarah Kate, and it follows American Sylvie Devereaux, who agrees to marry Scottish billionaire Killian Barclay in order to improve his Playboy reputation. Of course, the pair can't stand each other, but that might be the least of their worries when Killian discovers that his family has darker plans for him than arranging a marriage of convenience. This one has been getting such great reviews, and I've been loving seeing everyone who's been reading this book and loving it. And it just recently got a starred review from Library Journal that I am super stoked about. Next slide. The Crash is the newest thriller from the #1 New York Times bestselling author Frida McFadden. We're all Frida McFadden fans, of course. And it follows Tegan, who is 8 months pregnant, and her world is crashing down around her. The family of her baby wants nothing to do with her and has promised to make her life a living hell. So she has no idea what she's going to do. So in a last-ditch effort to find help, Tegan heads out into a storm to drive to her brother's house, but she never arrives. Tegan wakes in a ditch, having skidded off the road, and she's stranded and terrified, but she is taken in by a couple living in a remote farmhouse. Of course, this couple may have ulterior motives, and Tegan soon realizes she's stuck in the middle of nowhere at the mercy of strangers. This nightmare she's running from is nothing compared to where she's headed. Next, please. All right, The Empress, one of my favorites, is a new tarot-inspired portal romantasy series from New York Times bestselling author Kristen Cass. Hannah is having a absolute terrible day. She messed up the biggest pitch of her career, found her boyfriend cheating on her, and she can't pay her rent. So when she finds an Empress tarot card, she thinks nothing of it until it yanks her from our world and into Towerfall, a realm where there are no cell phones, no antibiotics or aspirin, and certainly no responsibilities. Well, except for one big one. The Empress card has apparently chosen her to save the Kingdom of Pentacles from utter ruin. And even worse, Hannah is being helped by Cain, a very attractive and exiled protector of the realm. Cain has secrets and a brooding attitude to match, but they have a similar end goal. They need to infiltrate the palace. Naturally, the one way to do that is via fake marriage. That, of course, then starts to not feel so fake. Next, please. All right, Babylonia is the newest ancient history retelling of the only female queen of ancient Assyria from the author of the Library Reads pick, Clytemnestra. Nothing about Semiramis's upbringing could have foretold her legacy. When she meets a young Assyrian king, a path unfolds before her, one that put her in the midst of a brutal world and at the heart of two men raised as brothers, one who just happens to be king. Now a risen lady of a court of vipers, Semiramis feels the precariousness of her position. And so instead of bartering with fate, she trains in both war and diplomacy. And with each move, she rises in the ranks, embroiled in this game of power, desire, family, and betrayal, until she can ascend to the only position that will ever keep her safe. Queen. Next, please. And then from the best-selling author of Shotgun Love Songs comes A 40-Year Kiss. This is a rugged, feel-good Valentine. It is a small-town novel for readers who still believe in sunset triumph and second chances, and follows Charlie and Vivian, who parted ways after just 4 years of marriage. There were too many problems and too many struggles. But when Charlie returns to Wisconsin 40 years later, he's not sure what he'll find. He is sure about one thing, though. He must try to reconnect with Vivian and pick up the broken pieces of their past. But 40 years is a long time. It's 40 years of other relationships, of building new lives, and long held regrets, mistakes, and painful secrets. Next. The King's Messenger is the newest historical romance from New York Times bestselling author Susanna Kearsley, and it takes place in 1613 when King James sends his messenger, Andrew, to Scotland to arrest his late son's close advisor, Sir David Murray. Accompanied by his aloof neighbor, Phoebe, Andrew slowly untangles the real point of his mission, to frame Sir David for Prince Henry's death. But Andrew is unwilling to bring an innocent man into a treacherous betrayal. Andrew's feisty and lovely neighbor Phoebe has always been standoffish, having heard malicious gossip about Andrew. But as they journey to Scotland and back, Phoebe sees Andrew for the honorable and loyal man he is, and her change of heart may open new possibilities for them once their mission is complete. Next slide. All right, last but not least, The Story of My Life is the first in an all-new Laugh Out Loud romance series from #1 New York Times bestselling author Lucy Score. This book is Gilmore Girls meets Schitt's Creek in a fictional small town I promise you'll want to move to after reading this. It is a big city rom-com author who no longer believes in real-life happily ever afters, who seeks inspiration in this small town by buying a house and a spot on city council for this small town that needs its own happily ever after. Next slide, please. And of course, that's all I have for you today, but please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Don't forget to vote for library reads, and thank you so much. I believe I'm handing it over to Lynette.
Oops. Hi. Okay, I am Lynette. Let's kick off Spring Chronicle books with, next slide, Play It Forward. You'll see the final cover for this one once it releases on Edelweiss. It'll be as cool as the company that brings us this book. Together is a media group co-founded by kick-ass women's pro athletes Alex Morgan, Chloe Kim, Simone Manuel, and Sue Bird, and was named one of Fast Company's 10 most innovative sports companies. Next slide. It focuses on sports storytelling rooted in lifestyle and youth culture. Their latest project, Play It Forward, curated the stories of 25 women from all corners of the sports universe. Next slide. Stories and experiences featured here are all diverse, but what they have in common are superstars defying expectations and rebelling against inequality in big and small ways. They're overcoming barriers of race, age, socioeconomics, you name it. Next slide. I am personally not a huge sports person, but there's a reason you don't have to be one to enjoy sports-themed movies or those 30 for 30 ESPN series. Likewise, this is a collection that will absolutely uplift and inspire. Next slide. Speaking of inspire, if you're into IG-worthy garden core, this one's for you. Amber Grossman is a woman behind the popular account Black Girls Gardening, an online community connecting Black women gardeners and inspiring others to start a garden and give back to the land. Next slide. You'll find first-person narratives of urban homesteaders, women caring for land that's been in their family for generations, women with Indigenous ancestry, professional chefs. Next slide. Dreamers, activists, artists, all demonstrating how a gardening practice has the power to heal, educate, and connect. Next slide. The profiles are interspersed with practical gardening tips, but above all, here's a celebration of the empowering gift of gardening, no matter how green your thumb is or isn't. Next slide. Our imprint, Princeton Architectural Press, features some of the best in architecture and design. This book is a particular gem on their list this season. Next slide. In the late 1800s in the South, Black skilled artisans are said to have outnumbered white artisans 5-1, and they were doing this work of creating against immense odds with little or no recognition. Atlanta-based designer and scholar Robella Wake spotlights just 10 of these groundbreaking works of Black craft and the artists behind them. Next slide. You'll meet ceramicist David Drake, an enslaved potter and poet in South Carolina. Anne Lowe, the couture dressmaker who designed uncredited Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress, and the celebrated quilters of Gee's Bend, just to name a few. Next slide. The essays demonstrate the undeniable intersection of Black history and culture, Americana, and excellent design. The illustrations by artist Jonalyn Holland give the book a visual language and shine the spotlight beyond the individual objects as artifacts and onto the makers and their craft traditions. Next slide. Acclaimed essayist Nicole Grave-Lipson looks to literature to help her navigate the innumerable nuances of being a girl, a woman with a body, a partner, a daughter, a mother, the list goes on. She might look to Kate Chopin's story, The Storm, to help her reckon with her mother's infidelity, and to Shakespeare's gender-bending heroine Rosalind as a North Star when she and her oldest child contemplate gender identity. My favorite chapter is a reflection on the author's transcendent bond with her best friend. If you think that's predictable territory, where else will you find Shakespeare, references to historical records of male and female bonds, Western philosophy, the Bible, and a Mean Girls critique all in one place? Fictional Mothers is a smart, thought-provoking collection of essays that takes readers on a journey to untangle truths and fictions from the stories that were told. Next slide. Chronicle does a lot of cookbooks. I'm going to point out just a few here. When I say hot date, I'm talking about the ancient superpowered superfood fruit that has doubled as a viral sensation because apparently Snicker date bars have gotten over 1.3 billion views on TikTok. The author draws inspiration from her Middle Eastern and Indian cooking background to feature 99 dishes, interwoven with anecdotes about the date's cross-cultural historical significance. You've got some poetry, the author's own watercolor images and hand lettering, and so much more. I'm not kidding. I didn't pick the most beautiful of the beautiful photos in the book, but curried sausage rolls with a surprise inside just sounded delicious, which is why it got chosen here. Your Pasta Sucks is more than a cookbook, just as Matteo Lane is more than a cook. Okay, he's not really a cook. He was named one of Variety's top 10 comics to watch, and on his popular YouTube channel, he's been guiding viewers through his favorite simple dishes while regaling them with his hilarious asides. Fans have always asked for the recipes. This book is a result. The recipes are rooted in serious pasta knowledge, but presented with his signature sassy wit. Buddha jumps over the wall. Did you know? In Chinese culture, dishes are so culturally significant, they're often connected to a classic legend, a famous person, or a historical event. This graphic novel cookbook uses folklore and the author's family anecdotes to explore uniquely named dishes, like husband and wife lung slices, heartbreak jelly noodle, and ignored by doggy stuffed buns. The book also kindly includes a hack for those of us who are chopstick challenged. It's all topped off with art by award-winning children's graphic novel illustrator Vivian Trong. And I'm going to close with, next slide, fan favorites. The beloved author of Darth Vader and Son has crossed over into the MCU with his latest X-Men Days of Future Fun. The Art of Elio. If you haven't seen the trailer for Elio, this is another gorgeous, otherworldly misadventure by one of the geniuses behind Coco. So my bar for this book and this film are really high. And the third book in the Dumb Bird series, I love a good author origin story. The one for Matt Kroc can be traced to a really unhappy experience he had with a fourth grade bird report. 40 plus years later, we have the Dumb Birds books featuring his drawings of real birds everywhere, as well as actual facts about them, sort of. Also, don't call him a birder or a bird watcher. He is a bird critic. Next slide. That's it from me. My contact is on the slide. Thank you for listening. I think I'm passing it on to Quirk.
Hello, everybody. It is Ivy Weir from Cork Books. I'm excited to talk to you about some of our fall 2024 titles. Next slide, please. So it's spooky season and horror movies are on every channel, but what if you're somebody that can only watch through your fingers? Enter Horror for Weenies by Emily C. Hughes, who you may already know from her newsletter Jump Scares. And if you don't subscribe to that, I highly recommend it as a collection development tool for horror. This informative and entertaining guidebook gives summaries, cultural context, and factoids about some of the most important movies in the horror canon, from classics like Night of the Living Dead to modern favorites like Hereditary. This book has been resonating with readers who maybe have to read a plot summary on Wikipedia rather than watch a movie to keep up with what's happening in horror. And Emily actually just recently contributed a not too scary reading list to the New York Times, so be sure to check that out. Next slide, please. Cult following, the extreme sects that capture our imaginations and take over our lives. For true crime readers, historian of the odd and occult J.W. Ocker has a fascinating overview of some of the most notorious cults in history. But Ocker approaches this overview not from the analysis of their leaders, but instead why followers felt like they offered something valuable. So shifting the perspective from the leader, which is what we see in a lot of true crime narratives, to the victims. Plus, that doing this over a webinar does not give this package any of its due. It's truly gorgeous in person. Next slide, please. Revisionaries by Christopher Jansma. Did you know that Octavia Butler had writer's block for 7 years? Or that F. Scott Fitzgerald kept a folder with all of the sentences he cut from manuscripts in case he could reuse them later? Even history's greatest authors struggled with the things that anyone who has tackled a writing project is familiar with. Stars, they're just like us. The award-winning author Christopher Jansma has gathered really fascinating looks into the lives of literature's greats and their early drafts, abandoned projects, and just hot garbage things that they ended up leaving on the cutting room floor. You definitely want to hand this one to aspiring writers, students, or anyone that just really loves to get an interesting factoid about their favorite author. Next slide, please. Tiny pep talks, bite-sized encouragement for life's annoying, stressful, or flat-out lousy moments. You can get a pep talk before you walk down the aisle, start a new job, or tackle something really big in your life. But what if you have to schedule a doctor's appointment over the phone or parallel park? Comedians Paula Skaggs and Josh Linden give these rightfully deserving moments the pep talks they deserve. I included this one because as we head into the election and the winter, this book is an absolute ray of sunshine and something that I think we all need as we look at a lot of stress in our lives. Next slide, please. You Gotta Eat. Real life strategies for feeding yourself when cooking sounds impossible. Let's be real. Sometimes work, health, burnout, or exhaustion lead to a meal of shredded cheese straight out of the bag. But it doesn't have to be that way. Philadelphia Inquirer Deputy Food Editor Margaret Eby offers low-impact solutions to feeding yourself when cooking feels impossible. She tackles no matter what your energy level is, whether you've got enough going to chop an onion or maybe you can barely manage to open a can of beans, you can still make a nourishing, delicious meal. Folks are really loving early reads of this book, and it's gotten shout outs on Simply Recipes, Forbes Vetted, and NPR's Pop Culture Happy Hour. Next slide, please. Taylor Swift by the Book, the literature behind the lyrics, from fairy tales to tortured poets. It's no secret that Swifties love to decode Taylor Swift's lyrics. They're always looking for references and Easter eggs and sharing their findings on social media. And in this book, English literature professor and author of The Darcy Myth, Rachel Fader, and musical theater performer Tiffany Tatro give fans a little help by identifying and explaining the books, poems, and plays referenced in Swift's songs, plus some literary context and fun bonuses like reading lists for every era. This book is gorgeously illustrated. Next slide, please. And you can think of it as the ultimate collection of liner notes for Swift's catalog. In a sea of Swiftie titles, I think this smart and beautiful bookish deep dive really stands out by providing literary analysis through the author's professional acumen, as well as a hearty dose of fandom through their own status as Swifties. Next slide, please. Okay, are there any Clay McLeod Chapman fans in the room? He's been named a modern master of horror by outlets like Vulture and Esquire, and Jordan Peele called him one of my favorite horror storytellers working today. Clay's star is definitely on the rise in the horror community, and he is just sort of universally beloved by the folks in that group. In this visceral social horror, families are being ripped apart, literally, by a mass possession outbreak that is fueled by watching certain channels or engaging with certain apps. Noah Fairchild has been losing his formerly polite Southern parents to far-right cable news for years, so when his mother leaves him a voicemail warning him that the Great Reawakening is here, he assumes it's related to one of the many conspiracy theories she believes in. But when his calls go unanswered, he journeys to Richmond, Virginia, where his mother brutally attacks him. Together, he and his nephew must race back to Brooklyn, but can they make it before the violent hordes get to them? Definitely give this to fans of authors like C.J. Lead and Agustina Bastarrica, fans of shows like The Last of Us or movies like When Evil Lurks. And then next slide. The last book I'm going to talk to you about today is Death in the Downline. If you're like me, you've been sucked into recent documentaries exposing multi-level marketing schemes like Lula Rich. And in Death in the Downline, author Maria Abrams frames a page-turning mystery in this fascinating world of girls' trips, sales parties, and downlines. A down-on-her-luck journalist moves back to her New Jersey hometown to live with her father, where she encounters her former best friend. She's given a chance to reconnect through the multi-level marketing company Luminous. But it becomes apparent that something is rotten at the core of the company, and she can't rest until she determines what's going on. Next slide. That's it for us. Thank you so much for coming today, and feel free to reach out to me anytime for ARCs and DRCs. Thank you.
Hey folks, I'm Annie Mazes from Hachette Book Group. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. That's my information. Please get in touch if you have any questions. Next and first is nesting. On a bright spring afternoon in Ireland, Kira Fay makes a split-second decision that will change everything. She straps her 2 young daughters into her car and drives away, determined to never come back. For fans of Claire Keegan and Louise Kennedy, Roisin O'Donnell's extraordinary debut creates a devastating and suspenseful portrait of gaslighting and emotional abuse, and even better, a triumphant story about family, love, and finding a new place to nest. Next is The Quiet Librarian. A librarian's quest for answers and vengeance leads her back to her own dark secrets in this novel about an ordinary woman transformed by war, family, and the murder of her best friend. Though she now leads a quiet life working in a Minnesota library, Hannah is haunted by the events of 30 years ago that saw her thrust into the horrific cruelties of the Bosnian War. The Quiet Librarian comes from best-selling author of Saving Emma, Alan Eskins, and will appeal to fans of Never Far Away by Michael Korcha. Next is Green Teeth. This book is so fun and filled with delightful, unexpected friendships and quests. Jenny Greenteeth is a figure from English folklore that was used to prevent kids from going into lakes and drowning. Our Jenny is very curmudgeonly. She has lived for over 1,000 years in her pristine lake and has never spoken to a human before. But when a witch is thrown in to drown, something makes Jenny decide to save her. Temperance doesn't know why her village has suddenly turned against her, only that it has something to do with the malevolent new pastor. Though they have nothing in common and are sorely misjudged, these two must band together on a magical quest to defeat the evil that threatens Jenny's lake, Temperance's family, and the very soul of Britain. I'm not a big fantasy reader, but I love this book. It is a delight. Next is A House for Miss Pauline. When the stones of her house begin to rattle and shift and call out mysterious message to her in the middle of the night, Pauline Sinclair, age 99, knows that she will not make it to her 100th birthday. Kim Greenteeth is terrific. Pauline has lived a modest life in her rural Jamaican village, but behind the seemingly benign facade, she's buried many secrets. The whispering stones, Miss Pauline realizes, are telling her that she must make peace with the past before she dies. This novel asks profound and urgent questions about who owns the land on which our identities are forged, for readers of Nicole Dennis Benn or James McBride. Next is Red Dog Farm, an atmospheric coming-of-age story about a young man's transformative year on his family's struggling Icelandic cattle farm as he falls in love, discovers the purpose he's been missing, and seeks to connect with his stoic father, who remains haunted by a tragic past. This is from the critically acclaimed debut novelist of the Memoirs of Stockholm Sven. Next is Stone Angels. Told through the bold, determined voices of 3 women, this poignant family drama explores love and loss, grief and healing, and the sometimes difficult love that exists between mothers and daughters. It's about the questions we wish we had asked lost relatives, the lives we could have lived had we made different choices, and above all, second chances to reinvent ourselves, to confront the sins of the past, and to find lasting love. This is for fans of Black Cake or The Mountains Sing. Next is The Trouble Up North. This novel is an irresistible mix of the rich setting of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, the power of generational connection to the land, the tension between the locals and recreational resorters, and an impulsive act. Hi, Amy. That sets a fractured family down a path to redemption. This is an absorbing tale with an ending that emphasizes that at the heart of every strong family, no matter how fractured, is a fierce love. For fans of Netflix's Ozarks or Ron Rash's Above the Waterfall. Next is Rabbit Moon. I really like that jacket. From the New York Times bestselling author of Mercy Street or Mrs. Kimball, which was Virginia Stanley, the first day I met her, told me I should read Mrs. Kimball, and she wasn't wrong. That book is amazing. I really love Jennifer Haig's writing. And this is another wonderful novel. It's tense, propulsive family drama set in Shanghai, where a fractured American family faces its complicated past. with its themes of a complicated marriage and divorce, the bonds of sisterhood, international adoption, and the sexual secret and trauma that derails a family. This novel offers rich subject matter and several storylines that will appeal to book clubs. And a few nonfiction titles. Nico Case's memoir, The Harder the Fight, I Fight, the More I Love You. Grammy-nominated singer and songwriter, brings an incredibly written, powerful memoir. It paints a vivid portrait of an extraordinary life, one forged through a poverty-stricken childhood in, quote, slummy one-horse towns. Obsessive desire, bursts of comedy, indispensable friendships. She reflects on the ways that art, music, and a deep connection to nature helped her on a very singular journey. And last, The Body is a Doorway. In this lyrical, radically expansive self-portrait, celebrated poet, author, and lecturer Sophie Strand explores her own chronic illness and trauma, as well as the resonant challenges and joys of friendship, young adulthood, first love, and fertility. It explores questions both personal and universal, like is there healing beyond the human and beyond the hope for a cure or a happy ending? And that is it for me. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I am Chris Vicari from Union Square and Company. Nice to be here with all of you. I'm going to start with a quick reminder of what has just come out on the next slide, please. Our buzziest book at the 2024 conferences, Pride and Prejudice in Space. Also, The Timekeepers, a novel about love, loss, and friendship that takes us from 1979 suburban New York to war-torn Vietnam. There Was Night and There Was Morning is a graceful but brutally honest memoir by Sarah Sherbill that has hints of The Glass Castle. Then What to Cook When You Don't Feel Like Cooking, a recent New York Times bestseller, debuted at #2. Our South by Ashley Shanti, with her look at Southern food through the lens of the Black experience. And Bodega Bakes from Bronx-born pastry chef Paula Velez, a love letter to her Dominican heritage and New York City roots. Both Ashley and Paula will be speaking at the Library Journal Day of Dialogue Books Good Enough to Eat panel. Next slide, please. And in November, get your tumblers ready for Safecracker, where we meet Duke Duquesne, a thief who's got a dad in the joint, a sister in a coma, and shady federal agents who ask him to break into an unbreakable safe, which might be the answer to his problems, until he realizes that some things are best left unopened. Author Jesse DeRoy will also speak at next week's Library Journal Day of Dialogue on the debuts panel. Next slide, please. Moving into 2025 titles. Next slide, Zoe Brennan First Crush. Zoe is a character from Laura Piper Lee's first book called Hannah Tate Beyond Repair, and Zoe thinks she may be the loneliest lesbian in all of Georgia. But at least she's got her family vineyard and her father to keep her busy, and with the new wine festival coming to town, gives her a chance to stick it to the vineyard next door, run by her ex-best friend. But enter Lane Woods, another sommelier who was Zoe's first crush and is horrified to discover the one who Zoe's dad just hired as an eventual replacement. How can he do this to her? With her? It's a second chance romance with a first crush that drips with humor and heat, and where wine and pride collide at every pore. Next slide, please. A Rebel Without Claws, book one of the Southern Charm series. The bad boy Ronan Reed is a Texas werewolf with a hot temper right out of the Double Deuce and Roadhouse, where after another bar fight, leaves Texas to live with his uncle, the leader of a wolf pack in Louisiana, place where werewolf cage fighting is legal. Ronan has big plans here, but when he sets his sweet eyes on a sweet witch named Celine, his whole world stops, and Celine knows she's in trouble. The question, why can't she stay away? The answer is because forbidden romance is too tempting to resist. But when the other wolves start circling, how will they respond? Next slide, please. The Woman in the Wallpaper by Laura Jones. French Revolution is the backdrop here. We meet Sophie, a wallpaper factory worker, and her sister Lara at the factory. They notice the owner's former wife appears in the illustrated wallpaper. She met an untimely death years before and bears a resemblance to Lara. Soon, Lara realizes that her life is mirroring the scenes illustrated on the wallpaper that line all the rooms. And she wonders, is history repeating itself, and will she share that woman's same tragic fate? Next slide, please. Two Sisters by Rosie Whitehouse. The two sisters are the author's own mother-in-law and aunt. When the Nazis invaded France in 1940, their mother was deported to a concentration camp, and the sisters fled to an alpine resort village where they were rescued by a young doctor. Questions then arose. Why did this doctor shelter them? Was their mother betrayed? Also, deeper moral questions about French complicity. In the end, our author pieces together not only how the sisters were saved, but how so many others were lost. Next slide, please. As I move into spring and summer, we have 10 Marchfield Square by Nicola White. If you enjoy Only Murders in the Building, pay a visit to 10 Marchfield Square, an apartment complex in London where a minor criminal and his wife are found murdered. The landlady recruits two of her tenants to investigate. One is liked by everyone, the other's a mess. As they hunt for clues, they discover each of the residents has something to hide, and they need to work together if they're going to find the killer in their midst, assuming, of course, there's just one. It's witty, it's twisty, it's sharp and surprising. It's 10 Marchfield Square. Next, This Monster of Mine. First in a series by Shalini Abesakara. At age 14, our lead character named Sarai was found injured at the bottom of a tower with only one memory of how she got there. She was pushed out. 4 years later, she conceals her identity and returns to the scene of the crime as a prosecutor hell-bent on vengeance. And though she must fight against the forbidden attraction growing between her and a charming but sadistic judge, she can't help but shake the knowledge that his voice matches the only memory she has of her assailant. If you want manipulation, deception, and forbidden love, and who doesn't, This Monster of Mine is for you. Next slide. Moving into cooking and lifestyle. Next slide, please. We have Scratch That by Alex Traeger, a cover reveal to come. Does your smoke alarm go off when you cook? Or have you ever added salt instead of sugar to your cookie dough recipe? Well, then you need to meet our charming, delightful author, Alex Traeger, who thinks our messes should guide us as a way to build kitchen intuition. You may already know her. She does have over 1 million followers on TikTok and over 500,000 on YouTube and Instagram. Next slide, please. Her book is Scratch That, a cookbook written around the happy accidents that occur in the kitchen and result in flavorful, approachable recipes like her pork and pineapple tacos. Scratch That will inspire readers to test and maybe get messy with it. Each recipe is followed by a Scratch That section, which details ways each recipe could go awry and how to fix it, all which Alex learned the hard way. Next slide, please. And my last book is Pizza from the Heart, the story of Paul Giannone, also known as Paulie G. In 2010, at the age of 56, he turned his backyard passion into his, quote, retirement plan. That passion is now Paulie G's, a thriving pizza business that started in Brooklyn, but has expanded all over the country. It's in Columbus, Chicago, Baltimore, and Philadelphia, with more to come. In his first cookbook, Paulie G and his wife, Mary Ann, who go together like sausage and peppers, share their secrets on the over 100 recipes for their very popular pizzas, plus others of salads and sides and more, but also the lessons they've learned in their 40-year marriage and 13-year restaurant partnership. One tip being, in both food and love, watch the salt. Next slide, please. With books like Pizza Night and Pizza Czar selling so well, it shows that the public has an evergreen appetite for pizza. We're adding our toppings here with Pizza from the Heart. Next slide, please, my friends. Those are the books. That's the way it is on October 16th, 2024. Thanks for listening. And here is our next presenter.
Hi, everybody. I'm Golda Rademacher from Norton, and here's my contact info. And I will also put this in the chat after I finish. Next slide. So first up on the calculation of volume is going to be a 7-volume series being published by New Directions. The first 2 books are coming out in November. The protagonist, Tara, is stuck on the same day, November 18th, repeating itself endlessly. She finds herself in a lonely new reality without being able to explain why. The volumes remix the same curiously repeating day to create a hypnotic sense of eeriness. The author is one of the leading writers in Scandinavia, and this will help bring her work to the English-speaking world. And the first book was recently longlisted for the National Book Award for Translated Literature. Next slide. The Rest is Memory by Lily Tuck is publishing in December. The author was inspired by the photo of this young Catholic girl in Auschwitz. She was photographed by fellow prisoner Wilhelm Brasse, and not much else is known about her. Lily Tuck imagines the girl's upbringing in a village in southeastern Poland before her world imploded in late 1942. This haunting novel frames the girl's story within the epic tragedy of 6 million people who perished during the German occupation. This has received starred reviews from Publishers Weekly and Kirkus. Next slide. Super Bloom is the new book by Nicholas Carr, whose book The Shallows became a classic look at how technology and the internet affect your brain. In Super Bloom, he explores how social media has warped our sense of self and society. He guides readers through a history of the pitfalls of technological innovation, how telegrams sometimes hindered diplomacy, why radio became the perfect tool of authoritarianism, how the Facebook feed ushered in a new era of manipulation, and how AI now blurs reality and fantasy. He uses vivid examples from history, science, and politics to revolutionize our understanding of how media shapes society. It may be too late to curb the super bloom of information, but it's not too late to change how we react to it. Next slide. The National Book Award nominated author of Fieldwork is back with Mona Acts Out. Celebrated stage actress Mona Zahid wakes up on Thanksgiving morning to the clamor of guests packed into her Manhattan apartment and to a wave of dread. Her in-laws are lurking on the other side of the bedroom door. She's still fighting with her husband, and in just a few weeks she will begin rehearsals as Shakespeare's Cleopatra, the hardest role in theater. Mona escapes the apartment, which turns into an overnight adventure that brings her face to face with her past. Give this to your fans of Where'd You Go, Bernadette, Les, and Fleischman is in Trouble. Next slide. The Naming of the Birds is the second book in the Cutter and Bliss historical mystery series from Tin House. The first book, The House on Vesper Sands, was a library reads pick, and it got a ton of great reviews. The new book has a bit of a feminist revenge story, along with complicated people making difficult decisions in the name of justice. And there's some love for libraries and archives. You'll want to give this to any of your fans of historical mysteries or Gothic stories. Next slide. Pro Bono is the new thriller by Thomas Perry, author of The Old Man, which was made into a TV show for FX. In Pro Bono, we have a tenacious attorney grappling with a dangerous group of thieves and trying to figure out how this relates to a crime from his past. Next slide. Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fito. Isn't that an amazing cover? So her first book, Mrs. March, was a library reads pick. This one is even darker. Winifred Nati is the unapologetic serial killer of your nightmares. This is like a combination of a Victorian Gothic with horror, with some female rage, and a little bit of sardonic wit to balance out the psychopathic main character. I won't spoil anything, but the book does say right at the beginning that soon everyone in the household will be dead. Next slide. And then we have another dark book, Beta Vulgaris, which is a debut novel by Margie Sarsfield. This is socially conscious horror with some morbid humor. A young woman and her boyfriend take a seasonal job working on the sugar beet harvest in Minnesota, and things take a turn. Elise starts noticing strange things, threatening phone calls, a mysterious rash, and snatches of an ominous voice coming from the beet pile. By the end, the novel gives surreal shape to the real, pressing, and relatable anxieties of work, class, and money. Next slide. We have 3 new Norton shorts coming out in the winter: The Moral Circle, What's Real About Race, and Fewer Rules, Better People. Each of these books delivers bold thinking and provocative arguments in under 200 pages, perfect for students and for adults who want to learn about something interesting in a short amount of time. Next slide. We have a great batch of cookbooks coming out from Norton and our distributed publishers this fall. There's a revised and updated edition of My Bread by Jim Leahy, a new cookbook full of delicious dinner ideas from the cook behind the popular recipe blog Recipe Tin Eats, a new snackable cookbook from Jessie Sheehan, and a wide array of other food and cooking books to look forward to. And on the next slide, there are just a few more winter 2025 highlights. And next slide. So I'll put the links in the chat to my contact information and newsletter sign up and to our most recent catalogs. If you're looking for print ARCs, please sign up for the Norton Library newsletter because I do an ARC giveaway there every month. We also have digital ARCs on Edelweiss and NetGalley. And thank you all so much for listening.
Hi. Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Deb Seeger from Grove Atlantic, and you can find how to reach me here. Also, you can find, we're on all our books are on Edelweiss and Galley, and you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Just a quick shout out to, next slide, sorry. Just a quick shout out to Samantha Harvey and her novel Orbital, which is a finalist for the Booker Prize. This is an eloquent meditation on the on space and on space and life on our planet through the eyes of 6 astronauts circling the Earth. The winner of the Booker Prize will be announced on November 12th. Next slide. And coming from David Wright Faladay, The New Internationals in January, the author of the acclaimed novel Black Hawk Rising, David Wright Faladay, delivers a nuanced, powerful, and realized story. This is a unique work of historical fiction that vividly captures Paris just after World War II. But at its heart, it's a love story. Paris, 1947, Cecily Rosenbaum, a young Jewish girl quickly developing her own intellectual political ideas, meets Seb on her way to a communist youth conference. There they fall in love, and Seb is from West Africa. As Seb toils for the exams that will permit him to study in Paris, he also begins to dig into his roots in Dahomey, the West African kingdom where he came from. Cecile, who has moved to the big city, clashes with her Jewish family and reckons with the memories of her childhood under Nazi occupation and her fierce dedication to her new political ideologies. Seth and Seal find themselves entangled, and along the course of the novel, they lose and find each other again and again through the jazz clubs and the growing protest movements in Paris. Next slide. From Lauren Francis Sharma, the author of the Book of the Little Axe, which nominated for the Houston Wright Literary Award, is a riveting literary novel with sharp edges of a thriller about the abuses of history and the cost of revenge, set between Washington, D.C. and Johannesburg, South Africa. With early praise from Angie Kim, Rebecca Mackay, and Soli Gonzalez, this is really one of our big books for the winter. The novel is inspired by Francis Sharma's time in 1996 South Africa and what she saw and what she learned as a witness to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's amnesty hearings. The story opens in 2018 in Washington, D.C., with Prudence Wright and her husband speeding through a summer storm to get to dinner with Davis's new work colleague. The colleague turns out to be a man Prudence knew decades ago in South Africa, who has tracked her down specifically, and reasons for his appearance immediately turns Prudence's stable, happy life on its head. Next slide. And starting this December and into the winter, we have a wonderful lineup of crime novels, crime fiction. First up in December, Gabriel's Moon by William Boyd. In Gabriel's Moon, Boyd returns to the world of espionage that he explored in his best-selling novels Restless and Waiting for Sunrise. For readers who love Mick Herron, this is Boyd's most exhilarating novel yet. Trekking from the vibrant streets of 60s London to the sun-soaked cobbles of Kazis, the frosty squares of Warsaw, as a travel writer turned reluctant spy, is drawn into the shadows of espionage and obsession. This novel has already received great starred reviews from PW and Kirkus. From the internationally best-selling author who is filling the gap left by Len Dayton and John le Carré comes a propulsive espionage thriller for fans of David Silva and Olin Steinberg. Meet disgraced MI5 agent Slim Parsons, a character who, like Lisbeth Salander, will sear your soul. Slim is back to MI5 to take part in Operation Linesman, where she is asked to infiltrate a news website, Middle Kingdom, whose exploited articles clearly show that they've hacked into the most high security government database. But Lineman's turns out to be anything but simple. Slim uncovers a curious connection to Middle Kingdom and the legendary Belchy Park codebreakers. And all the while, she's being watched by someone else, even deeper in the shadows. The Enigma Girl will draw any readers interested in code breaking, especially the Belchy Park code breakers who broke Enigma in the Second World War, many of whom were women, and that is what Enigma Girl emphasizes and celebrates. And two quick shout-outs to Brad Morrow, The Forger's Requiem, coming in January, a gripping literary thriller that brings readers inside the world of expert forgery and brings to life Mary Shelley's voice throughout. And finally, in February, South African writer Dion Meyer, who has a devoted and growing following amid avid fans across the crime community, including Stephen King, Michael Connelly, and Tess Gertison and Tom Perry. Leo is a new novel starring his beloved yet flawed detectives Benny Grizzle and Vaughn Cupio, who must put their career on the line to find links between three seemingly unrelated homicides in corrupt South Africa. And just quickly, lastly, which I don't have a slide for, I just wanted to remind you that Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan is now a movie. It's hitting theaters on November 8th, starring Cillian Murphy. Next slide. And thank you so much. You can find all of our information here. And if you go to Grove Atlantic, you can sign up for our newsletter. Thanks. On to Kate.
Hi, everybody. My name's Kate, and I'm with Penguin Random House Library Marketing, and I'm excited to share a few titles with you guys today. So can I get the next slide, please? All right, so first up, I just have a few intro slides. Many of you may know or be familiar with our debut samplers, but we just put out a new one. These are collections of excerpts of new debut titles that you can peruse through, find your next read. They're really great, and they're all available on our website. Next, please. And then we have two exciting upcoming virtual events, as many of you may be aware of. Again, LJ Day of Dialogue is next week, as well as our Winter Book and Author Festival, which is going to be in December. These are going to be great days filled with lots of panels, lots of info, lots of resources. So links to sign up are on the screen, but I'll also get them out to all of you guys afterwards. Next slide. Okay, so the first title I have today is Water Moon. This is an enchanting fantasy set in kind of not so distant Tokyo. Our main character, Hana, inherits a hidden pawn shop only seen by those who are lost in life, where people can sell their regrets. This is until one day she arrives to the shop to find it ransacked and her father missing. And on that day, for the first time, a charming stranger stumbles into the shop offering Hana help rather than asking for it. The two of them have to travel through a mystical world, riding on the backs of paper cranes and crossing the bridge between midnight and morning to try and find Hana's father and save the shop. But in doing so, Hana must confront her own secrets and regrets and risks losing everything with it. Next. Okay, next up, we have Harlem Rhapsody. This is a beautiful piece of historical fiction about Jessie Redmond Fawcett, the woman who ignited the Harlem Renaissance. Jessie is poised to become a great. She is the first female literary editor of The Crisis, which is a Black magazine, but she harbors a secret. She has been the mistress to writer and founder of The Crisis, W.E.B. Du Bois, who is married, 14 years her senior, and her boss. This book is filled with iconic characters, including County Cullen, Langston Hughes, and Nella Larson, and it's the perfect read for anyone looking for an insightful and riveting look into the personal lives of authors and icons we admire today. It's going to be great for fans of Kristen Hanna and other female-driven historical fiction. Next, please. Deep Cuts is a super exciting debut from Crown, perfect for fans of High Fidelity, Daisy Jones and the Six, and other music-based fiction. So in Deep Cuts, we follow Berkeley, California students, Joe and Percy, who find commonality in a campus bar one night talking about music. Joe's a songwriter himself, and he soon goes to Percy looking for feedback on his work. With Percy's guidance,
Jo soon catapults to indie icon musician status, and Percy finds herself in a partnership with Jo that is thrilling, confusing, and at times stifling. Can Percy ignore her own talent and her heart in order to preserve their collaboration and to better their work? Deep Cuts kind of looks at the ideas of belonging, obsession, and talent, but above all else examines our need to be truly heard by those around us. Next. Okay, next up, I have Fagin the Thief. This is a reimagining of the world of Charles Dickens, and we follow Jacob Fagin, London's most gifted pickpocket and one of Victorian literature's most infamous villains. We follow Jacob through life from when he was brought under the wing of an older thief in his youth to his adulthood, where he adopts a teen boy into the same life. Until one day, in his adulthood again, Jacob is forced to reconcile with his path when a robbery goes awry, and he needs to decide what he truly stands for and what a life is truly worth. Fagin the Thief is colorful and funny and fun, and it breathes new life into otherwise kind of gray, grim Dickensian London. Next. And then keeping on the British theme, this is another debut, but this time we are in 1930s Britain, and we follow DCI Lillian Wiles, who is the first ever female chief detective at Scotland Yard when she is faced with the murder of Baronet Sir Henry Heathcote. Instead of taking a typical approach to this case, Lillian enlists the help of the 4 British queens of crime, Agatha Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers, Najeo Marsh, and Marjorie Allingham, to help solve the case. This is perfect for fans of traditional British mystery, like the works of Agatha Christie and the like, but also great for those looking for a fun, feminist twist on the genre. Next. All right, and I think I ran a little under time. I'll save you all about a minute, but you can find all of our e-galleys on Edelweiss, and I'll be sending out a list afterwards. So thank you all. On to Pamela, I believe.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pamela Osti. I'm with HTP Books or Harlequin Trade Publishing. On the next slide, let's get started. This is Blood of Hercules. I'm so excited to share this book with you. I think it's going to be a big one this fall. This is by Jasmine Moss, and it tells the story of Alexis, a homeless teen living in a semi-post-apocalyptic world that is infested with murderous creatures called Titans. One day, a blood test reveals that she is actually part Spartan, an elite race of immortal warriors who have godlike powers. Suddenly thrust into the Spartan War Academy, Alexis's fight for survival becomes even more perilous as she's forced to compete in deadly games and physical challenges, all while guided by her 2 villainous mentors. Blood of Hercules is an enemies to lovers romantasy where the villains, yes, villains plural, get the girl. It's perfect for anyone that can't get enough of Sarah J. Maas or Rebecca Yarros. On the next slide, we have an exciting debut in historical fiction. Jane Yang's The Lotus Shoes is perfect for fans of Pachinko and Banyan Moon. It follows 2 young women from very different backgrounds. Lin Jing, a woman from an esteemed family, and Little Flower, her talented maidservant, as they navigate their limited realities as women in 19th century China. Little Flower has bound feet, which is uncommon for a maidservant, and she's also gifted at embroidery, a skill associated with women of fortune. Resentful of her talents, Ling Jing does everything in her power to prevent Little Flower from escaping. But when scandal strikes the family, both women are cast out to the celibate sisterhood. This is perfect for fans of Lisa C. and Amy Tan, and it just eloquently navigates complex issues of class, female friendship, survival, and the rigidity of ancient customs. Next slide. A powerhouse author on our list that needs no introduction. Pam Jenoff, of course, is the author of The Lost Girls of Paris and Codename Sapphire. She's a New York Times bestselling author. She's here now with her most riveting novel to date, Last Twilight in Paris. It's London, 1953, and Louise is still adjusting to her post-war role as a housewife. At a secondhand shop, she discovers a necklace in a box with the name of a department store in Paris. Louise believes that she's seen this necklace before and that it holds the key to the mysterious death of her friend Franny during the war. Following the trail of clues, Louise sets out to Paris, where she discovers the dark history of Leviton, a once glamorous department store that was converted into a prison camp during the Nazi regime. This is both a gripping mystery and an unforgettable story rooted in history. It's absolutely moving. And then next slide. We have Library Reads Hall of Fame author Lisa Unger. She's back with Close Your Eyes and Count to 10. This is like Squid Game meets Survivor. It's a riveting thriller about a high-stakes game of extreme hide and seek, featuring a motley crew of characters. It's set in an abandoned hotel on a secluded island, so it's got this eerie atmospheric sense of claustrophobia. Lisa loves to expose the dark flaws of humanity. And in this one, she looks at the extreme things people will do for a like or a follow. There's lots of twists and turns, edge of your seat suspense, compelling and richly drawn characters. So fans of Riley Sager will absolutely love this one. Next slide. Horror is such a growing category, and we have an exciting new voice in horror to share. Yi Turhan's novel, Their Monstrous Hearts, centers on a struggling writer who inherits his estranged grandmother's villa and her famed butterfly collection, only to realize the crumbling estate is hiding darker secrets than he could ever have imagined. This dreamlike Gothic novel is perfect for fans of Mexican Gothic and Hereditary. Yeats, a marketing executive at Valentino, and his background in fashion clearly comes across in his very lush, tactile writing style. And then next slide, Alka Joshi is a force to be reckoned with. Her New York Times bestselling Jaipur trilogy, which started with The Henna Artist, has sold over 1 million copies worldwide. 6 Days in Bombay follows Sona, an Anglo-Indian nurse who goes on a journey across Europe to prove her innocence after a famous painter dies under her care. The artist leaves behind 3 paintings and a note asking Sona to deliver them to her former lovers in Prague, Paris, and Florence. And along the way, she uncovers the shocking history of a wonderfully complicated and sometimes cruel but always magnetic woman. This is compelling writing grounded in history with vivid characters that leap off the page in a sweeping mystery. Next slide. Midnight in Soap Lake by Matthew Sullivan is a novel set in the real-life town of Soap Lake, Washington. But in Matthew's hands, Soap Lake is a location of creepy events, eccentric characters, and mysterious property. So think Twin Peaks or Stephen King's Castle Rock. The novel follows Abigail, a Denver transplant, and Esme, a Soap Lake native who dies under mysterious circumstances. As Abigail unspools the mystery of Esme's death, she befriends an eccentric library patron, a neighbor in recovery, a hotel manager, and an orchard hand, all while trying to uncover more about the legend of a mythic figure named Treetop. Matthew Sullivan's debut, Midnight at the Bright Ideas Bookstore, was an Indie Next pick, and Midnight Soap Lake has a lot of subtle Bright Ideas Easter eggs throughout. Next slide, The Amalfi Curse by Sarah Penner. So Sarah Penner needs no introduction. Her debut, The Lost Apothecary, was one of our biggest books of the last 5 years, and she's really knocked it out of the park again with The Amalfi Curse. This is a bold, witchy historical novel set on the high seas and the glittery shores of Positano in Italy. It's a dual timeline narrative that follows a nautical archaeologist who's in Positano on a research fellowship and secretly hunting for sunken treasures. As she embarks on her treasure hunt, she begins to uncover an ancient curse and the story of forbidden love and witchcraft during the 1800s. And then we jump back and forth between these two narratives, the present in 1821, where we meet a powerful sea witch who's in a perilous situation that will have ripple effects for centuries to come. So this book is perfect for fans of The Cloisters, Wayward, and Starling House. And then on the last slide, this includes my contact information. You can follow us at HQ for Libraries on Twitter, visit us at our website, and feel free to reach out with any questions at all. Thanks so much for listening.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amelia Mejia. Thank you for joining us today to hear about new books from Blackstone Publishing. First up, we have American Ghoul by Michelle McGill Vargas, releasing September 3rd. Equal parts carnage, comedy, and unflinching social commentary, American Ghoul is the outrageously entertaining tale of a former slave, her vampire companion, and their escape from the post-Civil War South into 1866. This is her debut novel. It was selected as a Library Journal pick of upcoming horror fiction and a reactor pick of SFF titles to look forward to, among others. And it is noted as a uniquely brilliant lens on Reconstruction and America's refusal to reckon with its racist past. Next, we have Break Every Rule by Brian Freeman, releasing September 10th. When Tommy Miller's wife and daughter are abducted, it seems his past is catching up with him, but his wife Teresa has her own secret. And to find his family, he must peel away the clues she's left behind. The estate of Robert Ludlum has chosen Brian Freeman to continue the iconic Jason Bourne series. He is currently writing his 4th novel on this reboot of Ludlum's classic character. The Bourne Sacrifice, authored by Freeman, appeared at number 10 on the New York Times mass market bestseller list this past July, and it is a Thriller Zone's #1 pick of top 20 summer reads. Kirkus says reliable thrills, bone-crunching action scenes, and satisfying revelations of corruption in high places. Next we have First Do No Harm by Joe Kenda, releasing September 10th. A string of overdoses in Colorado Springs has detectives Joe Kenda and Lee Wilson on the lookout for heroin cut with fentanyl, as a local anesthesiologist begins distributing it, angering the Mexican crime syndicate. This is Kenda's second foray into fiction, with himself as protagonist and a plot based on his own experiences with 21 years as a homicide detective and commander of a major crimes unit. Kenda is a high-profile celebrity author and star of Investigation Discovery's Homicide Hunter and American Detective. This is a hasty book list pick of upcoming books. His previous book, Killer Triggers, earned a starred review and box review from Publishers Weekly, calling it an exceptional memoir, a must-read. Next, we have Gaslight by Miles Uras Parakeet and Sarah Shepard, releasing September 17th. Rebecca lives a happy life with her husband and children, her secrets well hidden. Then a friend arrives, scrambling to discover the women's intentions. Rebecca loses sight of the danger facing them all. This is Sarah Shepard's adult debut, full of the intrigue that made her famous and is perfect for grown-up fans. The Gaslight podcast has 3.2 million listens since its launch in late 2019 and still generates tens of thousands of streams per month. A starred review from Booklist notes a timely, tense, compelling thriller that stands out for its exploration of the inner workings of cults, the susceptibility of young minds, and the fragility of friendship and marriage. A must-read for fans of cult stories, thrillers, complex characters, or even friendships turned sour. Think Pretty Little Liars. Next, we have The Last Dangerous Visions by Harlan Ellison, releasing October 1st. In 1973, the author announced the third and final volume of his anthology series, but it was never completed. Now, 6 years after Ellison's passing, science fiction's most famous unpublished book is here. Ellison is one of sci-fi's most beloved and controversial figures. Tantalizing hints of this final release swirled in publications such as The Guardian and the New York Times for years. This is featuring all new stories to accompany the original publication. A starred review from Booklist notes a worthy capstone to Ellison's monumental legacy. Next, we have Rogue Community College by David R. Slayton, releasing October 15th. Isaac is an assassin with the ability to gain the knowledge of others from their blood. After crossing paths with an elf queen, he goes to a magic school to learn where he and his talent fit in the world. Think Umbrella Academy meets Doctor Who with more than a few dinosaurs. Slayton's books have twice been finalists for the Colorado Book Award. Library Journal says perfect for fans of T.J. Klune and those who enjoy a queer-normative, whimsical world full of witty prose and heartwarming relationships. Next, we have Merlin's Tour of the Universe, revised and updated for the 21st century by Neil deGrasse Tyson, releasing October 29th. Merlin has observed firsthand many of the major scientific events of Earth's history and answers all questions about them with authentic science. Tyson has revisited his first book, originally published in 1989, and made substantial updates and revisions to make it as appealing as his recent bestsellers and accessible science for all ages. The author's books have heard high praise from Science News, Scientific American Book Club, Discover Magazine, Astronomy Magazine, and more. And Tyson's books have also received starred reviews from Publishers Weekly and Cricket's Reviews. Lastly, we have The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose, releasing November 26th. Sarah Morgan is one of the best criminal defense attorneys in Washington, D.C. Sarah now finds herself facing her most challenging case yet when she vows to defend her husband, a man accused of murdering his mistress. The paperback version of this title was originally released 3 years ago, selling over 1 million copies and was optioned for film, and this is its first time in hardcover. Her previous book, Home is Where the Bodies Are, has been named a Barnes & Noble Best Book of 2024 so far, and The Perfect Divorce will be published by Blackstone in all formats in April 2025. Then just a little reminder to please submit library read notes for any of our titles that you enjoy. And finally, we have our contact information, so please reach out for galleys or if you have any questions. Thank you.
Everybody, my name is Celia. I am the Library Marketing Manager at IPS, and today I'm just going to run through some indie titles that you should know about. Next slide, please. First up, all the romance readers out there, yes, there is another follow-up in Brynne Weaver's wonderful Ruinous Love trilogy. This is the third in the trilogy. Expect more from Brynne. She definitely has more stuff coming, but this is the capstone to this trilogy that went viral on TikTok and has been a New York Times bestseller. These novels are all standalone, so they can be jumped into at any point if you haven't read Butcher and Blackboard or Leather and Lark yet. And then another TikTok favorite, H.D. Carlton's books are all at Zando now. This is Shallow River, it's the next one. But again, we have all Carlton's titles in our backlist, so don't miss out. Next slide. For romance readers who want something a little bit more literary, Separate Rooms I can't recommend highly enough. This is a beloved Italian novel. It's a classic in Italy, and it's never been translated into English. It'll be out just in time for people to go see Luca Guadagnino's adaptation of it, which stars Josh O'Connor, who was also in Challengers, and Leah Seydoux. Next slide. And another beautiful literary romance. This is about a beekeeper who has this kind of dark, tragic past. He falls for a lonely shepherdess in the hills alongside of him. Very lush, very romantic. Next slide. Completely new direction. This is for the horror fans in the audience. Hungerstone is a remixed retelling of the first vampire novel, Carmilla, a classic of kind of queer, sapphic, lesbian vampire novels. And then Freak's Law. This is about a vengeful traveling circus that makes its way to a small Scottish town. Highly recommended for fans of Geek Love or Angela Carter. It's glittery, it's weird, it's very funky. Readers are going to love it. Next slide. If you liked Sarah Moss's Ghost Wall or Rachel Kushner's Creation Lake, this is a great one to pick up. It's a little bit more horror infused than those two. The Sleeping Land is about a team of archaeologists. It's the early 90s. The USSR has just collapsed, and they're excited to kind of do the first Western dig of the Siberian wilderness. Little do they know that there's something out there in this seemingly sparsely populated forest with them, and they start to wonder if the past is not as past as maybe they thought. Next slide. New crime fiction. I don't have a cover for this one yet, but this is the author of To Live and Die in LA, a classic of crime fiction. This time, this is a Hollywood murder mystery. It's full of glitz, glamour, and of course, a bunch of dark secrets. Rio Muerto. Romero is one of the most kind of beloved major Colombian novelists. This is a haunting, hypnotizing crime novel told from the undead perspective of the victim of a senseless murder. Next slide. Beartooth is a combination of kind of crime and adventure. It's about two brothers who live on the outskirts of Yellowstone Park, super rural Montana. They're struggling to keep afloat since the death of their father. They have bills to pay, they have cars to maintain. A strange drifter comes to town, and they undergo this unusual proposition with him that will change their lives. It's a great novel about revenge and survival. It's in a beautiful, brutal part of the American West. Obviously, Yellowstone is kind of a buzzword of its own, so anyone who has any interest in stories of American survival, the American West is going to love this one. Next slide. A couple of really great historical fiction picks for you. The Cafe with No Name is a charming story of love, companionship, and renewal. It's 1960s Vienna, still recovering from World War II. Robert decides to revitalize a dilapidated old building. He turns it into this wonderful cafe and salon for this community that is still recovering from the scars of the war. Robert himself was raised in a home for war orphans, and he finds this place for community and mourning and rejoicing that has long been denied to him, as well as to his fellow Austrians. The Ghost of Rome is a little bit of a different direction. This is a high-pressure suspense story. It's about a resistance group that helps victims of Nazi-occupied Rome flee the country. The arrival of this mysterious airman newcomer will threaten the secrecy of this essential group, as well as the security of those whose lives they save. This is a sequel to the best-selling My Father's House, but it works as a standalone. Anyone who's a fan of World War II or suspense is going to absolutely love this. Next slide, please. Different direction again. A young, recently married woman has moved to Nigeria. She finds herself torn between two men offering very different futures as Nigeria itself confronts civil unrest. This is a really beautiful, authentic story of a country kind of at the precipice of great social change and a woman who's caught in the middle of it. Next slide. Oh, right, that beautiful Atlantic Waltz. I am remiss to make another Claire Keegan comparison. This has some Claire Keegan elements. I hope Deb is not still on this call. But it's a really beautiful story about finding grace and friendship even after you've given up hope for redemption. And it's set again this very sparse rural part of Scotland, this beautiful Shetland area about two people who connect unexpectedly. Next slide. This is my last genre section, the psychological dramas. This is kind of my territory. The Voices of Adriana is a really wild piece of metafiction about a grad student who becomes obsessed with her father's increasingly manic online pursuit for a new girlfriend. Two Lines published another psychological fiction written by a prominent Madrid author, that would be Woodworm, that was recently longlisted for the National Book Award. I can't promise this one will also be a National Book Award long list, but I wouldn't count against it. Two Lines is doing some really interesting stuff in independent publishing and translation. The Colony is another title that's had enormous success in its home country. This time it's Sweden. It's like the biggest literary phenomenon since A Man Called Ove. Very different genre though. Emily is this woman searching for respite from work-induced burnout. She goes to the countryside and meets this bizarre colony that promise a new way of living. It's dark, gripping. There's a television adaptation coming. You're going to see it everywhere. Next slide. This is The Passenger Seat, another really great psychological thriller. Two young men go on this road trip. They're confronting masculinity. It has to do a little bit with like the loneliness epidemic amongst men and kind of internet radicalization. Highly recommend. Very dark, really interesting story about modern men. Next slide. This is my wild card pick. My therapist says this grief journal is a good idea. You need one, dark humor. It's about a young man whose father passes away suddenly. He writes this very funny, dark journal to keep himself afloat. Next slide, as I run out of time. Thank you all for listening. My correct email address is on there. Thank you, Lainey. If you have questions, if you want to have an author come to your library, you need a galley, please reach out to me. I am more than excited to talk to you. Thanks. I'll pass off to Margot.
Hello, everyone. I'm Margot McCoy. I'm with Macmillan. Here are all the ways you can get in touch with us online, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about any of the books I'm talking about today. Next slide. Many of the titles we'll be talking about today are or will be available to read on Edelweiss. If you're not already waitlisted for automatic downloads, send us an email at the email address on the screen and we'll get you set up. Next slide. And please feel free to join us on Mondays at 4 p.m. for our Happy Half Hour series where we talk about all the upcoming books we're excited about. And now on to the books. So our first title is She Doesn't Have a Clue by Jenny Elder Moak. This adult debut is a half mystery, half romance genre mashup set at a wedding on a lavish private island. When Kate, best-selling mystery author, agrees to attend her ex-fiancé and current book editor's wedding, she's prepared to plaster on a fake smile and finish her latest novel as a wedding gift. But when the bride is poisoned, a dead body is found, and the weather is turns, holding everyone hostage, she finds herself in a real-life mystery that echoes the plot of her latest novel. Romance readers get a compelling love story, and mystery readers get a gothic setting and a locked room murder. And with witty banter and one-liners, there's something for everyone. It's perfect for fans of Glass Onion with elements of the beloved game Clue. Next slide. Our next title is Johnny Careless by Kevin Wade. This is a debut novel by the showrunner of Blue Bloods and screenwriter of Working Girl, True Colors, and more. After a heartbreaking case that earned him his NYPD detective shield and burned him out of his job, police chief Jupe Milan is returning home to Long Island. He's now leading a small local police department and navigating the same place where he grew up. But when the corpse of his childhood friend is found, the past collides with the present and he's pulled into a treacherous web. He has to untangle a knotted mystery fraught with theft, corrupt local moguls, and decades-old secrets, all while grappling with grief for his lost friend. With colorful characters and small-town politics, this is a classic crime novel for fans of James Patterson and Jane Harper. Next up is I Think They Love You. This is an adult rom-com debut from best-selling, award-winning YA author Julian Winters. Dennis Carter desperately needs to find a fake boyfriend. Why? To convince his family members that he is capable of commitment, enough so to handle taking on the CEO role after his father's retirement. But when his best friend is a no-show for the role, he turns to Braylon, the man who broke his heart. Braylon has his own reasons for reappearing in Den's life, so they make a deal to help each other. It's all business at first, but soon enough, Denz is caught between business and a second chance at love. It's a queer romance with fake dating and family hijinks, and it's Succession meets Schitt's Creek. Next slide. Next up is A Killing Cold by Kate Alice Marshall, the author of What Lies in the Woods and No One Can Know, and it's perfect for readers of Riley Sager and Stacey Willingham. When Theodora met Connor, wealthy, charming, and a member of the powerful Dalton family, she fell in love in an instant. 6 months later, he's brought her to Idlewood, his family's isolated winter retreat, to win over his skeptical relatives. Theo has tried to ignore the threatening messages she's receiving on her phone, but she can't ignore the footprints in the snow outside the cabin window or the strange sense of familiarity she has about the place. Then Theo finds something impossible, a photo of herself as a child taken at Idlewood. As she begins to piece together fragments of her memories, she realizes that someone here has a shocking secret that they'll do anything to keep hidden, and she's in terrible danger. This book is delicious, twisty fun that will keep you glued to the page until the final shocking revelations. Next slide. Next up is Upon a Starlit Tide by Kel Woods. This is from the author of After the Forest, and it's an enchanting historical fantasy combining elements of The Little Mermaid and Cinderella into a tale of love, power, and betrayal. It's set in a seaside town in France in the mid-1700s, and it follows a young woman, the daughter of a wealthy ship owner, who spends her days being taught how to sail by her best friend. But when she rescues a drowning man from the sea on a stormy morning, she's immediately drawn in by his charm and finds herself plunged into a world of glittering balls, fairy magic, seduction, and brutality, where secrets that have long been lost in the depths of the ocean begin to rise to the surface. This one is perfect for fans of fairy tale retellings, such as Hannah Witton's For the Wolf and Alex E. Harrow's A Spindle Splintered, and for romantasy readers who are looking for lush writing and plot with a heart-fluttering romance. Next up is The River Has Roots by Amal El-Motar. This is the hugely anticipated solo debut of the New York Times bestselling and Hugo Award-winning co-author of This Is How You Lose the Time War. This is an enchanting story of two sisters, heirs to an extraordinary stewardship in the town of Thistleford on the edge of Fairy, and what happens when one of them falls in love with someone from the land beyond. As the two are separated by worlds, desires, and even death, they never let go of their love for each other. This heartbreaking story is filled with lyrical writing and will destroy you and rebuild you, and it's perfect for fans of T. Kingfisher and Alex E. Harrow. And our last title is Things Left Unsaid by Sarah Jafari. When 26-year-old Shirin bumps into Kian at a London house party, she's taken aback by the feelings that immediately resurface. It's been a decade since the two friends were pulled apart by painful events, and ever since, Shirin has been lived with the weight of things left unsaid. As she struggles with feeling stuck in her job and her friendships, Kian's reappearance in her life is a bright light and offers her a bit of a glimmer of hope. The two are determined to hold tightly to each other, but life often has other plans. Will it be different this time, or are they destined to fall apart again? It's a dazzling exploration of healing, discovering your place in the world, and the lasting power of love for fans of Mame, Olga Dies Dreaming, and Normal People. It's urgent and relatable and deeply romantic, and you'll find yourself rooting for Shirin through a year in her life as she faces setbacks and discovers power and love and healing. Next slide. And that's it for me. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I hope you've enjoyed these books.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm Katie Vaughn. I'm the marketing manager at Bloomsbury for the adult trade team. And I will drop our Google form link in the chat so you can easily request copies of the following books. But for now, we will jump right into the first slide. So coming up just next Tuesday, we have The Wood at Midwinter by Susanna Clarke, the beloved best-selling and prize-winning author of Piranesi. This new, beautifully illustrated short story is a treasure that's perfect for the holiday season and all fantasy readers. It follows an unusual girl who can talk to animals and trees, who encounters a strange figure in the woods while walking one snowy afternoon. Set in the world of Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, it also features an afterword from the author about how she came to write it. Then in November, we have another perfect holiday read, Time of the Child by Niall Williams, the author of beloved bestseller This Is Happiness. This latest book is a compassionate, life-affirming novel about the Christmas season that transforms the small Irish town of Faha. In the Advent season of 1962, Ronnie and her father, the town doctor, have their lives turned upside down when a baby is left in their care. Charming and heartwarming, with starred reviews from Kirkus and Booklist, this is a winter must-read beloved by Ann Patchett, who says, "I am such a fan of Niall Williams." And then in December, we have A Century of Tomorrows. Acclaimed cultural historian Glenn Adamson takes readers on an intellectual thrill ride through the kaleidoscopic story of futurology, with accounts of self-proclaimed futurologists like Buckminster Fuller, as well as an eclectic array of other visionaries who have influenced our thinking about the world ahead, like Octavia Butler, Ursula Le Guin, Marcus Garvey, Timothy Leary, and more. The book offers an illuminating account of how the world was transformed by the practice of future casting. And then in early January, we have Cold Kitchen by Caroline Eden. This is a cozy, thoughtful memoir recalling food and travel in Eastern Europe and Central Asia from a basement Edinburgh kitchen, featuring delicious recipes at the end of each chapter. Join Caroline as she cooks from her travels, reflects on past adventures, and contemplates the kitchen's unique ability to tell human stories. Hauntingly honest and at times heartbreaking, this is a memoir with the smell, taste, and preparation of food at its heart. Then on the next slide, we have What to Do When You Get Dumped, a guide to unbreaking your heart by mother-daughter author-illustrator duo Susie Hopkins and Hallie Bateman. When Susie's husband of 30 years unexpectedly left her to pursue an old flame, her grief was so overwhelming that she thought her own heart might stop. In this new book, she charts a path to healing, offering wisdom to emerge from a breakup smarter, stronger, and with the unshakable knowledge that you are worthy of lasting love. Perfect for readers experiencing any form of heartbreak or readers trying to support those who are facing loss, this is a heartwarming and humorous guide that bestselling author Emily Henry deems like a warm hug from your best friend. If you don't already follow Hallie on Instagram, I highly recommend you check her out. And then on the next slide, we have The Loves of My Life, a stunning revelatory memoir of a lifetime of gay love and sex from the legendary author Edmund White. In this peerless memoir, the 85-year-old paterfamilias of queer literature recounts the 60-plus years of sexual escapades that have inspired his many masterpieces. With White's signature honesty, irreverence, and wit, he paints an indelible portrait of queer history in America and abroad in the way that only someone who has lived through it can. And then on the next slide, we have Mutual Interest by Olivia Wolfgang Smith, which is an unputdownable queer love story that takes place at the turn of the 20th century. Our main character, Vivian, is desperate to flee her origins in Utica, New York, so when she meets Oscar, middle manager at a soap company, she finds a partner that she can guide to build the life she wants. Not least because, more interested in men himself, Oscar will leave Vivian to tend to her own romances with women. As they begin to build their empire, though, they become entangled with Squire Clancy, a scion of an old American fortune, whose love affair with Oscar soon complicates the relationship. Exposure soon threatens, and all three partners are made aware of just how much they have to lose. And then on the following slide, we have The Dark Mirror by fan favorite fantasy author Samantha Shannon. This is the highly anticipated fifth novel in her best-selling series, The Bone Season, and I won't spoil too much of it for you, but our scrappy heroine, Paige Mahoney, is back and everything is about to change. She's outside the Republic of Sion for the first time in more than a decade, but she has no idea how she got to the free world. Half a year has been wiped from her memory. Completely immersive and heart-pounding, this is a must-read for all fans of epic fantasy, devotees of Samantha Shannon, and eager followers of The Bone Season. And then on the next slide, we have The Hymn to Dionysus by cult favorite author Natasha Pulley. This is a mythical reimagining like you've never seen before, tackling the story of Dionysus, Greek god of ecstasy, revelry, and ruin. In her masterful and propulsive prose, Pulley weaves a captivating queer love story between Phaedros, a soldier raised in a brutal Greek legion, and Dionysus, a blue-eyed witch whose presence seemed to beget riots and unrest wherever he goes. Full of magic, conflict, romance, and tender humanity, this is a perfect book for all readers of mythological tales, fans of complex characters, and for those looking for a truly new and unforgettable take on the classic retelling format. And then on the next slide, finally, we have all of these fantastic titles on deck as well. Money Lies in God is what Congressman Jamie Raskin calls an indispensable citizen's guide to the anti-democratic MAGA right in America, written by acclaimed author and reporter Catherine Stewart. Shots Heard Around the World is the definitive account of the Revolutionary War and its monumental legacy, written by celebrated historian John Ferling. And in The Golden Road, William Dalrymple draws from a lifetime of scholarship to highlight India's oft-forgotten position at the heart of ancient Eurasia. And in Death is Our Business, John Lechner takes us to key places where the Wagner Group fought, interviewing members, veterans, and victims to deliver a shrewd, granular sense of how Russian mercenary forces operate. And on the very last slide, that is it for us. Thank you so much for listening, and do feel free to reach out to me via email to ask any questions and check out the Google form in the chat. Thanks.
All right, that brings us to the end of our book buzz today. Thank you so much to all of our amazing presenters. And thank you to Grace for running the Zoom behind the scenes. And thank you, all of you who hung out with us today. I hope that your TBRs are stacked high. We will be reaching out in the next day or so with the recording and all the slides and everything that you need. But if there's anything else that you need, please feel free to reach out and we will be happy to help you. All right, well, I hope that everybody has an amazing day and thank you so much. Bye, everybody.